Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're gonna look at my Mahadi deck. Basically the story behind this is that I took apart my Rakdos discard deck and I made just a mono black deck with that, and I'll show that at some point. But I had all these Rakdos lands, right? So decided to make Mahadi because I thought the card was really interesting and also really good. And it kind of became a headache to play. So let's just get right into it. So Mahadi, if you don't know what he does, at the beginning of your end step, you get a treasure for each creature that died that turn. So obviously it's going to be rack, sack. You could kill your opponent's creatures and stuff, but again, your deck should never rely on, how many or what your opponents are playing. It's because you rather have you want like a guaranteed way to get your stuff going with your commander decks, and you can only rely on yourself basically. So let's get started. So we have Sack Fodder, guys, Shambling Ghast, Tenacious Dead. These are all like cards. These two you can bring back. Shambling Ghast makes a treasure when he dies, and then these you pay mana to bring him back from the grave. Village Rites. Sacks draw 2, sack draw 1, but this is an enchantment that sits on the board. You also gain life. Unearth is really good in this deck. Just reanimate for mana value 3 or less. Dredge, it's a 1 mana draw 1. You can sack a land as well and draw. DRC is insane in basically any deck that it's in. So Disciple of the Vault. Since we're making a lot of treasures, obviously it makes sense to just put this out. And I've had games where I sit on like 20 or 30 treasures and then bring this out and I sack them all and I win the game. Because you can make a lot of treasures with this. Thud. This is in here for, I'll set that to the side because that gets really funny. Carrion Feeder. You sack creatures and you make them bigger. So also good Thud target. Goodness. Quest for Pure Flames. Whenever a source you control deals damage to an opponent, you put a quest counter on it. You remove 4, and then you sack it. If any source you control will deal damage to a creature or player, deals double. So 1 mana, and they're always going to be taking damage anyway from stuff, so it's really good. Mortician Beetle. Whenever a player sacks a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on Mortician Beetle. So that's that combo there you can keep track of. Greedy Freebooter. Whenever it's basically just Shambling Ghast, except you get the Scry. Faithless Looting, because why not? Innocent Blood. Each player sacks a creature, so it's for 1 mana. You can get 4 treasures with this basically from Mahadi. Eaten Alive, you sack a creature to exile something. We don't have a whole lot of removal, but that just gets the job done. Corrupted, Conviction, Bloodghast. You can just keep bringing it back with Landfall, Novus, Occultist. When it dies, you draw a card. Caller Zealot, you can sack another creature, Surveil. You pay 1 mana, sack a creature, and then you can make people lose life and gain life. So we need sack outlets and sack fodder to make the deck work. Bankrupt is sacked 2 creatures and you draw 3. Talisman, obviously. Stormfist, Crusader. Basically, we do sometimes run out of cards a little fast, but this just helps us draw, and it also gets a ping in for everybody. Costly Plunder. You draw 2, sack creature artifact. Persist, because why not? This, when it enters, you make a zombie token you can sack. Molten Collapse is insane. You can you're basically always going to have this end with this deck. So you can blow up a creature, planeswalker, and a non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. So Solar Rings and whatever. This is only here for the bird together, so you sack a creature, or yeah, you sack it after you do this, but basically you shoot like a big creature at somebody and then you sack a creature. Priest Forgotten Gods. This card is not as good as I remembered it being, but it's still pretty good in this deck. Apprentice, Marionette Apprentice. It enters, and you make a 1/1 token, and whenever creature or artifact dies that you control, each opponent loses a life. So for an uncommon rack sack, that's obviously insane, right? Jury Master of the Review. This card is so funny. So whenever you sack a permanent, it gets bigger, and then when it dies, you deal damage to its power to any target. So that's another thing you have to keep track of. Rouse Reinforcements, it just makes 2 dudes you can sack with. Rakdos Signet, Cutthroat. Whenever something dies, your opponents lose 1, you gain a life. Deadly Dispute. Butcher Ghoul, Terminate. Fireblade Artist is not that good, but you know, it's another sack outlet that you have a guaranteed way of doing. Beginning of your turn, Dragon Fodder. You make 2 dudes, you sack, and you sack something, you draw 2. Fling, obviously, it's the same as Thud, except, you know, it's instant speed. Mayhem Devil, obviously. Buried Alive, because we have some ways of getting stuff out, and this can get us our big pieces or combo pieces in the grave, so we can just reanimate it and, you know, get it back. Lightning Phoenix, this card sucks, but basically at the end of the turn, you can pay 1 mana and bring it back from the grave. Rager, this card is, I actually had to read this card a few times because I couldn't believe what I was reading. So, 1 mana, sack another creature or artifact, okay. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. Okay, so that's already pretty good. And then it says, and draw a card. Okay. Like, that's pretty insane. And somehow that's uncommon. But, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, but like, that seems pretty good. Call of the Death Dweller, you get 2 things out of the grave. Tibalt, you make 2 things and they can't gain life. You sack them. Or you can sack them for stuff. Goblin Surprise, you make 2 1/1s. Saw Blade, Ripper. This is another thing you have to keep track of. So whenever at the end step, if you sacrifice 1 or more permanents, it deals that much damage to any target. So you gotta keep track of how many permanents you're sacking each turn. This guy, Hand of Hatred, another thing you have to keep track of. So you make a 2/1 beginning combat, and you sacrifice at the beginning of the end step. And then you can tap it, search your library for a card, and put it in your hand. And then you can only activate it if 5 more creatures died this turn. I almost thought about making this the commander, because being able to tutor, you know, basically every turn is pretty insane. But you have to keep track of how many creatures died or get the trigger. Skullport makes a treasure, and then you can sack stuff to draw a card. Combustion, you sack a creature, and it's a board wipe. You know, you want to play this probably like if somebody's getting ahead early in the game, and then you can just start playing your stuff. Pawn of Ulamog is insane. Whenever a non-token creature dies, you get a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn. You can sack it add 1 mana to your mana pool. It's colorless mana, but who cares? Alicia, Who Laughs at Fate. This is another card I wanted to make a commander on, but I still might. Basically, whenever it attacks, it gets +1/+1. At the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, return target creature card with mana value less than or equal to Alicia's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, really awesome card, and I think I almost want to make a deck on it. Chandra, Acolyte. Create 2 red elemental tokens. They gain haste, sack them at the end of next turn, next end step. So that's already pretty good. The -2 is a nice bonus. You basically get to cast instant or sorcery card with mana value 3 or less from your grave without, or no, you have to pay your mana cost for it, but still pretty good. Good recursion. Victimize, sack 1 thing and get 2 things out of the grave. Beedevil is another removal spell that honestly is pretty good. You hit a lot of things with this. Mainly artifacts because in Commander. Creatures, you know, some of them are really good, but Woe Strider, basically create a 0/1 goat when it enters, and then you can sack something to scry, and you can escape it later. So Morbid Opportunist, a lot of things are going to be dying, so why not draw a card? Swarm Piper, this is another really insane card. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you get a 1/1 rat. So obviously when 5,000 creatures are dying a turn with your deck, you can make a lot of tokens. So it's another thing you got to keep track of as well. Big score, basically draw 2 cards, discard 1, and you get 2 treasure tokens. This is here only for the sack thing, but still really good. Dimir Houseguard. Basically, you can just keep sacking creatures with it. You can also just transmute it and go get a 4 mana thing. Plunderer is insane in this deck because it's not just, you know, non-token creatures. It's all creatures that die, that you control die. You get a treasure. So obviously he has a villain. You can make a lot of treasures with this deck. Sling Gang Lieutenant. Okay. Basically, when it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. You sack 1, and you can make people lose life and you gain life, basically. But it's just here for the makes tokens and it sacks stuff. So Unexpected Windfall. It's the same as their big score, basically. A little harder to cast sometimes because it's 2 red, but it does the same thing. It's really good. Havoc Jester. So whenever you sack a permanent, you deal 1 damage to any target. So it's basically just crappy Mayhem Devil. Okay, so I'm probably going to take this deck apart because it gets to a point to where there is so much to keep track of in this deck that it becomes kind of unbearable. I had a few games where I had this out, this out, this out, and this out. And I had Pawn of Ulamog out as well. And I'm trying to get the most value out of my turn, right? So I had to keep track of how many creatures were dying for this, or I was sacking. I had to keep track of how many permanents I was sacking. And then I also had to keep track of how many permanents I was sacking for this. And then I had to keep track of how many creatures were dying for this as well. So at my end step, I can get all my treasures. And it was like every time I sacked something, I had to keep putting counters on these to keep track of how much was going on. And I had counters all over the place. And I just, it's not for me. I mean, I know people play Rack Stack all the time, but this is just not for me. Like, this is an absolute nightmare to keep track of sometimes because, like, you have to keep track of the type of permanents being sacked. And also in this deck, you're sacking all the time. So it's just it's a lot. And then on top of it, you have to do the math on, can I win the game that turn? Because you have your thuds, which you can just sack. You can kill 2 people with this, basically, because if you get this like 30, 40, which is pretty reasonable, actually. You sack this, you deal 50 to one person, and this deals another 50 to somebody else. But yeah, so basically it's an absolute nightmare to keep track of. One question I actually don't know is if this was the commander, and when it dies, it deals its like damage equal to its power to any target. Is that like commander damage? I actually don't know. But anyway, not that I'm gonna make a deck on that, but I'm just actually kind of low key curious. But yeah, that's it.